We have Heather here.
Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone.
Yes, and hi, I'm Gregor. Those who don't know me, and I'd love to welcome you to this mini retreat. Just as Will is behind the camera, but you know Will as well.
Hey, everyone.
Yeah, just as walking here, I just had this feeling of joy and sort of sweet to be here and play this kind of funny role of welcoming you here to our home together, our practice home. And still marvel a little bit at just this strange technology, and my hope is that you feel part of this practice container and yeah, the sweetness that I'm feeling here. I hope it's shared. So thank you so much for being here. Love these mini retreats, and we'll have Andrea teaching. I'll introduce her toward the end. I just wanted to share a couple words and things. The first being just about what's alive for me right now in Dharma. With all the heaviness that I feel in relationship to the world, this I care about deeply, there's also this kind of yearning or movement of the heart towards something lighter as well. And at times it feels like, is there really a place for this? Something like joy or silliness or laughter. And anytime it happens, laughter or silliness, the answer is quite clear. Yes, there is a place for this, and yet still I can be challenged and have doubt because of the seriousness of the world holding this. So in that vein, I felt inspired to share somewhat of a RV resident volunteer secret, things that happen here between retreats at times, and Heather's going to help me demonstrate. So here we are in this very community room. This is our badminton set.
Here it is.
Heather,
Please.
thank you. Why not?
So a little party joy.
Yeah, pretty sure. I like it. Ooh, yeah, you should have seen the form Heather is employing. Very impressive. You getting all this, Willa?
It's coming through clear.
Yeah? Oh, yeah. Okay, when we keep score, but it's all empty, so it's okay.
No need to keep score.
Thank you. Oh.
Yeah, that's.
You got it.
I
Okay,
know.
we'll call it a draw.
Call it a draw.
Okay.
All right.
The game will continue. Appreciate it, Heather.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yes. Offer you.
Wow. Thank you.
Yes. And one more thing. Come on over. Somehow this feels very connected to me. We also have Kuan Yin here. I wanted to speak about a bit, and maybe Will can kind of show me, but also just feel free to show Kuan Yin. So, for one thing, we have some cards here, kind of offerings to Kuan Yin for blessing, which I'll speak to. Just people and things we feel are important in the world. Kuan Yin, for those of you who don't know, is a figure in many lineages of Buddhism. And one way that she's depicted or understood is something of being dedicated to the benefit, to the welfare of absolutely all beings, of all time, space. That kind of orientation to the world, which inspires me deeply. And I just so appreciated having her here. For many reasons. One thing I find very beautiful is it is a single piece of tree, of wood. It's not something coupled together in a kind of man-made way. It's sort of been shaved away. And it reminds me of something I've heard Michelangelo said about his sculpture work in terms of the beautiful piece already existing in the material and just the other stuff that kind of gets in the way. Beautiful wood in another way, maybe being carved away, and something about like that inner beauty already there in the midst of it all. This is one thing. So I enjoy that Kuan Yin, for instance, just watched our badminton match This is a beautiful perception to me. Some people maybe feel like, oh, it doesn't belong. Like, does a badminton match belong here? Especially with this kind of holy being, you could say, kind of watching over. I enjoy the idea, silly as it may sound, that Kuan Yin had some fun there watching us. And kind of watching over our match. And I doubt she was too attached to who was winning and losing. I think there was probably, I'm not going to speak for you, but I just feel like there's partly like a pretty nice balance of care and engagement and enjoying this incredible magical display of humans playing this sport and seeming to enjoy each other. And wow, like how amazing. And yet balanced with like a very deep wisdom and equanimity. So she's kind of stable, and her posture definitely construes this to me. Important too, there's the stability. There's also a readiness to act in the world. And it's kind of circling back to more how I began, and that feels very important to me as well. You know, our practice of turning inward is so important and so beautiful, and I love it. It's not obvious. And yet, if we have this idea that it's really just about being internal, inward, and kind of inert, that doesn't quite feel wholehearted, whole-bodied for me. It feels obvious that as I'm in touch with my own suffering, my own love, my own beautiful qualities, I just see it in the world, all of it, the suffering and the beauty, and feel moved to be in that world. Yeah. So just wanted to share her presence with you. It's supported me, and I know others on retreat here. I'm just grateful for her and for this practice. So we have 2 minutes. Let's move fast. I want to show one more thing down here. Hopefully the internet works. Will is going to be very safe going down the stairs. Those of you who don't know, we're descending into the basement floor. Those of you who do know, maybe you're familiar. Bathroom, laundry. We're going to go into the RV space, the resident volunteer space, just to show this wonderful thing that has come up for RVs. 2 of us bought, let's see, Young Lee purchased these. They're these like blocks of willow, what are they?
I have no idea what they are.
Okay, they're like dirt and mushroom
Spores.
Spores, thank you. And look at this is just a couple days. I don't know if you can see this, but we have like a proper mushroom farm happening here. All of these like big caps. You got to see.
Yeah, I think it's coming through pretty well.
Wonderful. And so yeah, it's really something, and it's kind of beautiful to feel connected to these really strange but kind of wonderful little creatures. And we will, I think, probably make some stir fries. That's what I hear. I don't know what's going to happen exactly, but this is just kind of a fun thing that we have seem to be doing together, and bring some joy to our mornings. So maybe that's about the time we have. Again, thank you so much for being here. I hope this welcome was of something for you. And yeah, I'll pass it to Andrea, and many blessings.
Thank you, Gregor. That was delightful to see the mushrooms and the badminton and Kuan Yin watching over. So thank you. I appreciate the connection of joy to the practice. And so to start this, I'd like to, hear or see from you, not so much here in the chat box, where are you? And maybe a word of how you are too. Let's just start with that. Everybody kind of saying good morning and how you are. So yeah, you're welcome to chat in. Just hear from everybody. It looks like there's About 20 people or so here, 21 people. Some people from Santa Cruz, from Oregon, from London. From Boston. So some of you may not be able to type in the chat. I know the very first time that I logged into the live, I had to actually create an account. So if you hadn't done that, you may have some difficulty with that. Hawaii, Atlanta, Minneapolis, Saratoga, California, from IRC. Lovely people from all over the country. So thank you for that. So let's start with the sitting. Today, in the practice I'm going to offer today, I'm going to offer kind of an emphasis, I'd say, an emphasis on receptive practice, an emphasis on receptive awareness. Receptive awareness can be used in a very open form, and that's often how I teach it, with simply receiving what's here, whatever's obvious, just receiving experience. But this receptiveness can also be used in more focused practice. We can think of it as attuning to a particular area of experience and then receiving that aspect of experience. Rather than having the mind going out and looking for things, we settle back. We may attune to the breath or attune to body sensations, but then we settle back and just receive what's there in that field, in that attuned field. So I'm going to offer 3 words that I feel are foundations and supports for pretty much any style of meditation practice. And those 3 words are relax, receive, and allow. Relaxation is a great place to begin our practice, because as we relax our body, as we relax our mind, it supports a very natural capacity that we have to be aware, to be with what's happening in the present moment. When the mind is tense, caught up in thoughts of past or future, it tends to be pulled out of the present moment. But as that relaxes, as the body relaxes, it helps the mind to relax. And as the mind relaxes, it very naturally is here, is present. And then we can receive experience. Just receive what's here already, with an attitude or kind of inclination, maybe we could say, to allow what's here, to allow what's already here to be here. And so we'll start with relaxation. So finding a posture that feels at ease, as comfortable as you can be in this moment. And allowing the body to relax. And it can be useful to do this in a systematic way, starting the top of your head, and just seeing if there can be a softening or relaxing of the muscles, that area, the top of your head, your face. And can the face soften? Down the back of the head, behind the ears, the jaw. Perhaps the neck and shoulders can relax. It's an area where we often hold tension. Maybe the arms and hands can relax. The chest and upper back. Move those muscles around the rib cage. Sometimes I find as I explore relaxing the muscles around the rib cage, very naturally a deeper breath arises. And if that happens, or if you want to explore a deeper breath right now, that can sometimes support that relaxation of that area of the body. A deeper breath expands all those muscles around the rib cage and then allows them to soften and release as the breath exhales. Maybe another deeper breath. Perhaps the stomach and abdomen can relax. Middle and lower back, the hips. Maybe even deep inside the hip socket. All of those ligaments and tendons in there can relax a little bit. The legs, knees, ankles, feet. And then sometimes we can also incline towards or see if it's possible to have a relaxation more deeply inside the body. Maybe the inside of the throat can relax. Maybe the heart can relax. Maybe the stomach and the intestines can relax. It's not always available, but maybe you'll notice a little bit of a softening there. This inner relaxation is very closely connected with allowing the mind to relax. We often think about the mind being in the head somewhere. But the Buddhist word that is often translated as mind, chitta, also means heart. And when I was practicing in Burma, and Sayadaw U Pandita asked me to watch my mind, He pointed to his chest. He said, watch your mind. It's in your chest, just to the left of center. And yet for us in Western countries, we do often think of the mind as being in the head. And so maybe through an analogy, Gil sometimes suggests, as if the brain were a muscle, maybe the brain can relax. It might open to a sense of relaxation of mind. And as you relax the body and mind, you have been aware of that process. There's been awareness. Scanning through the body and receiving the experience, perhaps, and directing to the attention of how the body is and relaxing the body. There's been awareness there. And letting go of the attention towards attuning to relaxation. Just checking in, knowing that you're aware. What is most obvious in experience? Often it's body sensation. It's a very obvious area of experience. But rather than looking for what's here, we'll explore receptivity, receiving experience, settling back and letting experience come to you. A stance or a way to think about this kind of practice is as if you're a naturalist who's gone out into the woods or somewhere in nature that resonates for you. A naturalist who's gone into nature to see, to learn what's happening there. A naturalist goes into nature and sits quietly and needs to sit there for a little while before the activity of nature, of animals, at least in the nature, will begin to trust and to show up. And we just sit quietly in nature and receive what's here, receive what's offered, what's coming out to be seen, to be witnessed, and allowing it, curious, receptive and curious about what's coming out. We don't get to pick when we go out into nature what's showing up. We accept what is offered and learn from that. One day it might be about insects. One day it might be about small creatures. One day it might be about how plants engage with each other or with animals. So we don't get to pick. We see what's there, what's obvious and showing up. This kind of receptivity we can explore with our own experience. We are nature, very much so, a part of nature. Our system follows lawful, natural processes. And so can you have that stance of curiosity about what is this human experience? There's this body sitting here, experiencing, feeling, sensing, breathing, hearing. All of that happens. It happens whether we make it happen. We can't actually make it happen. That breathing, that hearing. We can consciously breathe, but our system follows its lawful process of receiving experience. And mindfulness can simply be a witness to what is received. And so, what is obvious? Body sensations, breath, sound, letting experience come to you. Sitting like the naturalist and being available for what shows up with interest and engagement, that curiosity bringing a kind of liveliness to the mind. Some of you may feel comfortable allowing this receiving to happen, just very broad, whatever wants to show up, being available for that, whatever's most obvious in experience. It could be in a range of experience, body sensation or emotion or sound. If your eyes are open, it might be seeing happening. The experience that's most obvious may change and probably will change. And so it can feel like entering into a flow. Just the next thing that's obvious, and then the next thing. In nature, things aren't static. There's a lot of change, and you may be watching one thing and then something else arises. That's fine. In our meditation, we don't need to hold to one particular area. So relax and receive what's obvious. For some of you, it may be simpler if you're more familiar with attuning to a particular area of experience, such as the breath. You could explore being with the breath, but then just settling back, just seeing how does the breath want to show up? Not aiming the attention at it, not trying to force there, but just more of an attunement and then receiving. Allowing the breath to come to you. Or others of you may attune more easily to other areas of experience, and that's fine. But exploring in these next few minutes what it might mean to receive that experience. And then, given that we are exploring just being with what wants to show up, can we have an attitude or a perspective of allowing, not resistant, not in conflict with what is showing up, allowing it to be as it is? This movement to allow experience to be as it is creates the conditions for us to be able to learn about what's happening. Rather than being involved trying to do something with it, we get to see how it's working, how it's functioning. And this allowing perspective brings an attitude of friendliness, of kindness, of love to our experience, joining wisdom and love together, learning and compassion coming together with this perspective of allowing experience. Can experience be allowed? And there are times when what's happening is quite difficult to allow. And when that's happening, perhaps you can step back, make the container perhaps a little bigger, allow that resistance. Not allowing is what's happening. Can that be allowed? It's okay. It's part of the unfolding of this experience. There's something happening and resistance. That's what's happening. Can that be allowed? And so exploring these three supports for our practice. Relax. Receive what's already happening. Allow. Opening to the possibility that what's already happening can be allowed. And all of this creating the conditions, supporting the conditions for us to understand and learn about our nature, much as a naturalist would learn while sitting quietly in the forest. So we'll have some time for walking. And for those of you who have done these half days before, we're going to have a slightly different schedule this morning. We'll have a half an hour for walking, but I'm going to offer a few suggestions to explore the walking from this more receptive style. If you've not done that, it's much less focused, and I'm going to encourage you actually to go out to take a walk in your neighborhood, wherever you are, if the weather is allowing, wherever you are. If not, you're welcome to, walk around your house or, but what I'd like to encourage is a little more normal pace, maybe slightly slower than normal, but not the really slow lifting, moving, placing type of walking. So in this kind of more receptive practice, we can simply receive whatever's happening. We don't have to be slow in order to just notice what's obvious. And so a good way to use the relaxation tool or piece or exploration is to begin when you're walking, to start by kind of exploring, where does the body and mind feel most relaxed while walking? Finding a pace that feels comfortable, easeful. And so you can experiment for the first few minutes of the walking with finding a pace that feels comfortable. And as you find a pace that feels kind of where you can kind of land with it comfortably, there's often a pace where mindfulness very naturally can easily be with the experience. And so finding that pace can allow there to be some ease of body and mind. And then once you've found that, then just begin noticing what's obvious. Being with your experience. That may be the physicality of moving through space. It might be the contact of feet on the ground. It might be seeing and hearing. When we're walking, that's a huge area of experience. And often we don't practice as much with seeing. And it's a really great exploration in our mindfulness practice to be curious about how seeing affects us. And so one kind of interesting exploration with this more receptive style of practice is to begin to notice where the attention is drawn. Not trying to direct the attention, but as you walk, the attention will be drawn to certain things. And this is very natural. Conditions arise in certain ways and our attention gets pulled. So if you're walking and suddenly a bird flies across in front of you, you're likely to start looking at that bird. That's conditions, it's natural. And so being curious about, maybe we could call the difference, what we could call the difference between seeing, which is maybe a little less oriented to any one thing, just taking in the seeing experience, and when the attention shifts to looking. Just noticing that shift. That's a natural shift. It's something that arises. It's something that happens. So that can be received. That shift of attention can be received. Similarly, in hearing, we might notice the shift between hearing and listening. Maybe just noticing kind of ambient sound or, just not particularly orienting to any particular sound, but then some very prominent sound like a car or a motorcycle or a bird, and then the attention is drawn to that. So this is a kind of noticing the natural shifting of attention, receiving how the attention shifts. So that's an area that can be interesting to explore. You don't have to like look down 6 feet in front of you. You can just walk very naturally like I kind of called this maybe stealth mindfulness. You're walking out in the world and not letting anybody know what you're doing is meditating, just being very natural and receiving what's obvious. So yeah, explore that and see what happens. There'll be time for questions later in the morning, and so if there's questions that come up with this, we can take some time for that. So enjoy your walking. And we will walk until 11 o'clock. And there'll be a bell 3 minutes before that. So, if you go outside to walk, do keep track of the time and come back a little bit before so you can be settled for the next guided meditation to begin at 11 o'clock. So enjoy your walk. So we'll wait a couple minutes for people to settle into their sitting posture before I start the next guided meditation. Before we start the guided part of this period, I'd like to offer another analogy about this receptive practice. And this one is more connected with using the receptive practice in a focused way. In the open receptive practice, we simply settle back and we don't try to attune to any particular area of experience. We simply allow what is most obvious to be what our attention connects with. And in a way, it's not so much of a doing there, it's what is already most obvious is what our attention is connecting with. And then it might shift to something else. With a more directed practice, we might attune to a particular area of experience, such as the breath, or maybe even metta practice, dropping in the phrases of metta. With the analogy I'd like to offer is that of a radio receiver. And attunement is a nice word with respect to this analogy, because we tune the radio receiver to a particular frequency, and then the radio will receive, it is a receiver, the radio receives that frequency. The radio isn't designed to go out into the air and grab that frequency, but rather there's an attunement, a narrowing of the range of the frequencies. And then the radio is designed to simply receive that range. And so kind of similarly with our practice, we can attune or kind of allow the attention to settle in a particular area of experience, such as the breath, and then receive. How is the breath being received? What is this in-breath like? What is this out-breath like? Not having any agenda for it to be in any particular way. Or with the metta practice, dropping in a phrase and then receiving how that phrase lands, attuning to the experience perhaps in the area of the heart, dropping in a phrase and exploring what's that like to have that phrase dropped into the heart. And so this receptive practice can be very useful in a way to encourage a more relaxed, non-striving kind of practice in whatever form of meditation you are most connected with. And so these three tools, relax, receive, allow, are applicable to any form of meditation. And so for the sitting, we'll start with relaxation, just allowing the body to relax again. Really useful to take a little time for this, allowing this relaxation of body and mind. Something that I find useful at times in my own practice around relaxation is if there's a measure of relaxation available already, then I drop this phrase or request into my system. May the body relax. So an invitation or a kind of an exploration of whether our system might have some way to show us how relaxation is possible. May the body relax. I'm not trying to do it, but see what happens. Receiving what happens with that phrase dropped in to your system. May the body relax. May the mind relax. And recognizing that you're aware and already receiving experience. You're welcome to broaden, open up past relaxation to just whatever is available. Or you are welcome to attune to whatever practice is most resonant for you, the practice you usually use, and explore that it might be an attunement to that area and then a receiving of what's there. Allowing the body and mind to stay relaxed so that it can receive. And opening to the possibility of allowing what's received to be just as it is, as it already is. Relaxation supports a very natural capacity to be aware, to receive experience, receiving what's happening, and exploring, allowing. Not trying to fix or change what's happening, Just being available to be curious. What's this experience? This human experience. This nature, body and mind. So these three perspectives on our practice, three supports, we could say, for our practice. Relax. It allows a kind of a setting up of the container of our practice in which the very natural capacity that we have to be aware shows up, available to receive experience. And the perspective that makes our mindfulness, wise mindfulness, brings it to the kind of mindfulness the Buddha said was supportive for helping the mind understand how it gets caught. Helping the mind to understand learn from experience. That perspective that supports that is allowing what's here to be here and curiosity about what's here. That's what creates the conditions for us to begin to understand how our minds get caught in struggle and stress and suffering. It's not a mistake when in our practice difficult things arise. That is an experience, a human experience, not to be resisted or pushed away, but to be understood. The first noble truth, the truth of suffering. There is suffering. Suffering arises, suffering ceases. The first noble truth is that suffering happens for us. And the Buddha's instruction for us around suffering is to understand it. Not to say, push it away, but to understand it. And the understanding happens with mindfulness. The mindfulness that meets experience as it is, as it already is, and allows it to be there so that it can be understood. So the allowing perspective really creates the conditions for understanding. Another word that might be used for allowing, another word that can approach or give us the flavor of what that mind is, what that kind of mindfulness is non-conflict. Not being in conflict with what's arising, with what's already happening. This is important too, that what we are aware of, what mindfulness meets in experience. It's already here. It's already happening. And so what this allowing is asking us to do is to meet and be fully aware of what's already here. Not to deny what is already here, and not to be in conflict with what's already here. It's already happening. What's here is already happening. If we're resisting it or pushing it away or trying to hold on to it, that's extra. That takes energy. That creates additional tension in our system. Creates the feeling that something's wrong, that there's a problem. And so there's this feeling of conflict. internally a feeling of conflict. This is not okay. I'm not okay. And what supports this attitude of non-conflict, of allowing? I think one of the key understandings that supports it, a key piece of wisdom that supports allowing and non-conflict, is understanding that what has arisen, what is already here, has arisen out of natural unfolding of causes and conditions. It's lawful what's arising. A lot of it is shaped by our past experience. It may be shaped by things that have just recently happened. Often we do experience things arising right now that are connected to what happened just earlier in the day. But what we are experiencing now is actually shaped by the vast set of conditions of our lives. How we grew up, how our family was, how we were treated in school, how our genetics are, how healthy we've been. All of this is conditions. And those conditions create a kind of a tumbling on. And a certain set of conditions, not just the external conditions, but also how we are, how we've responded, what we have frequently done, how we have frequently responded to experience, that also shapes our minds. For myself, my mind has kind of a proclivity, or particularly before I met the practice, had a kind of proclivity towards aversion. And so that got practiced a lot. That shaped a lot of my experience. So what's arising in this moment has been shaped. It's shaped based on past experience, past conditioning, past choices that we've made, as well as how we are relating or responding to it right now. So these are the conditions that kind of shape our moment to moment experience. When we don't understand that experience is unfolding lawfully, that it's just conditioned things arising and ceasing, conditioned experience tumbling on, we tend to take the experience as mine, as who I am, as me. And in that, we identify often with this is happening to me, perhaps, or this response that is happening, this is how I respond. I can't, that we have this sense of this is the way I respond. This is who I am. Sometimes it feeling like it's out of our control in a way that we respond in this way. Some of that out of control feeling has to do with the fact that it has been shaped a lot. And yet what the mindfulness does, what this practice of not being in conflict with what's arising, it allows us to begin to understand it in a new way. It allows us to begin to understand it as a shaped kind of experience, not who I am, but conditions tumbling on. So this, for me, this understanding that experience is conditioned. It's happened in the past. What's arising now is happening based on conditions that have happened in the past and how I am with it right now. And not being in conflict with that means that it can be helpful to have that understanding of conditionality, to not be in conflict with that. And not being in conflict with that allows us to open to and learn from it, understand something about how it's come to be, and also something about what might be a skillful response to it. And so this is key, I think, in our understanding of what non-conflict means. We might think that non-conflict with experience, with what's happening in experience, means that we don't do anything about it. There's no response to it. But with non-conflict, with that allowing perspective, it creates a container in which wisdom and compassion can be a part of what is arising in the moment. Wisdom about what skillful responses might be, compassion to alleviate suffering. And so wisdom and compassion arising with this non-conflict, with this allowing perspective. Wisdom and compassion are active qualities of mind. They also shape experience. Much like our experience has been shaped in the past based on our choices, based on what's happened, based on familiar responses. When wisdom and compassion arise, they shape a response to what is happening now. And so the non-conflict, when we meet experience with non-conflict, it doesn't mean that we don't respond, that we just sit here and sit back and say, well, that's what's happening. That's that. I used the analogy of the naturalist earlier in the first guided meditation. A naturalist sitting in the forest and receiving experience, receiving what creatures want to come out, and being available to be with what's here, allowing it to be as it is, rather than, I don't know, say chopping down a tree and taking it back to the lab. We sit in nature and let it reveal itself. But in sitting in that nature, if a forest fire comes through that forest, you don't just sit there. You take action to, wisdom and compassion, taking action to protect yourself, potentially to protect the other creatures, if that's possible. And so wisdom and compassion are not passive. This allowing non-conflict is not a passive response to the world. I think that's a crucial understanding about how mindfulness practice works. This action out of compassion, out of wisdom, is a very different character than action out of greed, aversion, and delusion. And so the last piece that I'll say, mostly what I've been talking about, is non-conflict with our own experience. And yet what we start to see, what we really understand, this perspective of understanding the conditioned nature of experience, the lawful unfolding of our experience, the compassion that can arise as we see how hard it is not to be caught by our habitual patterns of reactivity, how hard that is sometimes to just allow it, how hard it is to recognize, yeah, that's what's happening. Let me see if I can be with that instead of automatically reacting out of it. We see how hard that is for ourselves, and then extrapolate. We begin to recognize this is not just true for me. This is true for the other 8 billion people on the planet, that it's this hard. And it's even harder when people are not connected to a tradition or a practice that helps them to hold their conditioning. And so this exploration of non-conflict internally can help us to approach non-conflict externally, non-conflict in relationship with others. And again, it doesn't mean not taking action. We are asked to have some wisdom. We are encouraged to explore that relationship with others with wisdom and to respond when we respond out of wisdom and compassion, out of care and kindness, understanding when an appropriate time to act is. So, yeah, that's probably enough for a reflection for the morning, for whatever time it is for you, a reflection for this time. And let's open it up and see if there's any questions or comments. These questions could be related to the practice that we explored, the receptive practice, the allowing practice, maybe something about the walking. It could be related to the talk. I'm open to any kinds of questions. I know it sometimes takes a little while for questions to arise. Here's a question or a comment more. In practicing so much at home, I am seeing the subtle, powerful habits of mind I live with. Fascinating. Yes, seeing those habits of mind, if they can be seen and allowed, to not have conflict with them, there can be learning with those habits. And I think one of the things about the way mindfulness works, when we do have this approach of allowing what's here to be here, and curiosity about it, about the experience, curiosity about what is this experience? What is this nature that's here? What we start to see is, typically those habits of mind propel us into believing something. That those habits of mind actually have often a belief. They are rooted in some kind of a belief that this habit is going to get something for me. This habit is going to make me be okay in some way. This habit, in the future, if I follow this habit will give me some good result. And so, and the habit itself often based in greed, aversion, or delusion. What we're not seeing in that, because we're focused, when we're following habits, we're focused on the result that we may get. And so our attention is not in the present moment with those habits themselves, but with the hope for something to happen good in the future. And so the way mindfulness works, and mindfulness and wisdom together, and this kind of leads into a question that I see also popping up. I'm not clear about how wisdom and compassion are active processes. And so this is part of how mindfulness, from this perspective of allowing what's here, cultivates wisdom and then responds to experience. And so what happens with this allowing perspective of being curious about what's actually happening in the moment is that mindfulness, joined with this attitude of non-conflict, begins to be curious about what's happening right now, not about something possible in the future. And what's happening right now is greed and aversion in these habits often. And that greed and aversion is painful in the moment. So seeing that with this allowing perspective, seeing this, so this is some wisdom that develops, just this perspective of watching, witnessing what's happening, seeing what develops, seeing what unfolds. We see that the unpleasantness or the painfulness of those mind states. Unfortunately, there is a kind of a wisdom in our system that wants to move in the direction of well-being. This is one of the great things about the way our system works, actually, that the system wants to move towards well-being, but it's fundamentally confused about how that's possible. It thinks that following these habits is what's going to make me happy, but not seeing directly in the moment the painful nature of those habits. Delusion obscures the painful nature of those habits in favor of something that we might get in the future, maybe get in the future. So wisdom allows us to see that what actually is happening with the habits and patterns is that in the moment, well-being is not here. And given that our system kind of inclines naturally to well-being, the perspective of allowing experience helps our system to learn how to let go of those habits and patterns. It takes a lot of trust to meet these painful habits. I know it was kind of a shock for me when I first started looking at my habits of mind, anger being one of the big ones. Just this very thing of how the mind was so caught in the anger and what I thought it was going to get for me, the idea, the belief, this is going to make the other person really miserable. And then with a little bit, even just a little bit of mindfulness, it's like, wow, this is actually making me miserable. And to have the courage to be with that, that's where some of the wisdom develops. The wisdom that this is conditioned, the wisdom that this is a phenomenon arising now. It's not me, not the me-ness of it. The identification tends to kind of cement us into that pattern. We think that we can't change it, that that's who I am. But seeing that it's just conditions arising, sometimes it's here, sometimes it's not. That was also big for me. Sometimes the anger was there, sometimes it's not. Lessening that pattern of I am the angry person. Lessening that pattern of identification. So wisdom and compassion are active in that, also much like, I'll use anger as an example, wisdom and compassion are mental formations. They're qualities of mind that have a kind of a forward momentum to them, much as anger has a forward momentum to it. When anger is arising, anger tends to shape reactivity, it tends to shape aversion, it tends to shape lashing out or retreating from, it tends to shape some kind of separation from experience. Whether I am identified with it or not, that pattern of anger when it arises has a tendency to shape experience. Wisdom and compassion are similar. When wisdom is arising, when wisdom understands and sees, as an example, again, around anger for myself, this is probably the first time I saw how wisdom worked. I wouldn't have put it in those words when I first experienced it. But what happened was that I had been watching anger a lot and seeing the various conditions that lead to it and feeling the pain of it, seeing how it arose when certain thoughts arose. And so I was watching it, all of these things, watching this just with this kind of non-conflict, being curious about it. And at some point, several weeks into this process of looking at the anger, I saw a thought arise in the mind that was heading me in the direction of anger. It was a thought about the person I was angry with. I wasn't angry in the moment, but I saw the mind kind of inclining towards getting angry. Like, yeah, I want to jump on this thought and think more thoughts in order to get angry. But in that moment, this was not something I did. This was not something I said, oh, I'm going to drop that. But what I found happened, what happened to the experience, was that the mind understood, based on the previous weeks of having explored what the experience of anger actually is and how painful it was, the mind, in seeing that it was heading towards anger, wisdom saw that it was heading towards anger, and it just said, yeah, we don't need to do that. Wisdom let go of that anger and that direction to anger. And actually the anger never arose. That was not something I could have done. The understanding that had grown through the previous weeks of being with the anger had helped the wisdom to grow that this is something that the mind is participating in. This is something that is conditioned, and it's conditioned not just on the past, but how I am right now. And wisdom arising strongly in the moment. Wisdom let go. Wisdom created the conditions for the letting go of that direction to anger to happen. Compassion has a similar kind of function. When there is suffering happening, compassion has this movement, this wish to alleviate suffering. It will take action to alleviate suffering. So a lot more questions came in, and I'm sorry there's not time to address them. But yeah, it was lovely to spend time with you and to see some of your questions and your responses. And Lish put into community time immediately after the retreat concludes. And so at this point, I'd like to pass it back to Gregor, who from our welcome committee will say a few words.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Deep bows to you, your care and wisdom. Yeah.
Thank you, Gregor.
Yeah. And to the community, thank you all for being here. Really, I feel just as great as I did before. Thank you for taking part in this. And I'm so grateful we can come together in this way. Also want to mention that next week we'll be doing the same old thing, this time with Matthew Brunsilver teaching. So you're all very welcome to join us again, take part. And yeah, really just offer a goodbye from the RVs, from the residents here, and another warm invitation to come to community time. The link to that, I think it's a Zoom link, is on the YouTube page. If you just scroll down a bit, and I think in the chat box. and the password is community. So with that, thank you so much again, and I'll pass it over to Lish, who will take us into our community time. Take care.
Thank you, Gregor, and everyone. So yeah, community time is just a chance for us to say hi and also to continue to practice with this relaxing, receiving, and allowing, but in relationship. So feel welcome to shift on over to Zoom, and we'll start in a minute or two.